Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, Robert Meyer Burnett. I invite you to watch and listen to the Designing Hollywood podcast, brought to you by Martika Ibarra and the great, legendary Hollywood costume designer, Marilyn Vance. I am afforded the wonderful opportunity of co-hosting the show. If you are interested in the magic of Hollywood, the design of Hollywood, the clothes of Hollywood, watch the Designing Hollywood podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from, or find the video version on the John Campea YouTube channel. That's right, the Designing Hollywood podcast. Why would you ever want to miss it? Especially if you love the movies.
Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
I've heard it said before, like, it was a very smart man named Robert Meyer Burnett who said the currency of our current age is authenticity. And it's so true.
Imagination Connoisseurs Unlimited, in association with Max Allan Collins, writer of Road to Perdition, brings you True Noir, the Nathan Heller Casebooks, the immersive audio drama starring Todd Stashwick as Nathan Heller, once a 1930s Chicago PD officer turned private eye to the stars. Nathan Heller gets involved in fictional cases involving real people. Our crowdfunding campaign will be launching at the 1st of April. Please support us. We have many interesting stars taking part in this project, and you're going to want to be a part of it. Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and of course, the as-yet-to-be-defined existential Mr. Rogers. That's right. Me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I'm, of course, robcasting at you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this Post-Geek Singularity community. This is Robservations 950. 950. Ferris Bueller was only absent 9 times, but this is episode 950. Don't know what they have to do with one another, but they do. Something. I don't know. You tell me. Obviously, we got a banger of a trailer today. You know, we've got a couple of them. We got a new Furiosa trailer, but the movie that I was really curious about, because it was basically kept under wraps. I mean, when this movie was first announced, it was weird because they called it Alien Romulus, and then it's like, no, it's not called Alien Romulus. It's as yet untitled. It's just a new Alien movie, and then of course, it's called Alien Romulus, which is an intriguing title. I'm so tired of people talking about Star Trek. It's like, okay, Romulus and Remus. I understand they're Remans. We met them in Nemesis. But Romulus and Remus are not Star Trek. I just, I mean, hey, they've been name checked. Yes, but there's a whole intriguing. I'm going to leave it up to you. You guys do your own research. But it's irksome when people are like, oh, Bob, I bet you like that because it's a reference to Star Trek. I can't even. Anyway, so the important thing was a minute-long trailer. It was a banger. They used that old sound effect from the original Alien trailer, which is one of the great trailers of all time that they reused for Aliens, another one of the great trailers of all time, kind of in the same genre, same kind of vibe. It was really cool, very smart. I've talked about the president of 20th Century Studios, Steve Asbell, on this channel before, the quiet king of franchises. He was overseeing the revitalization of the Hellraiser franchise on Hulu. We saw Prey. He oversaw that. And this summer, it's interesting. If you go back, take the Wayback Machine to almost 40 years ago, the summer of 1986, at various conventions and things, 20th Century Fox was promoting a summer where they gave us, check it out, the summer of 86, Aliens, The Fly, and John Carpenter's Big Trouble in Little China. That's the Coupe de Villes, or my rendition of it. Sorry if I just destroyed all your ears. But it was a big deal. They were promoting those movies together. They had ads in comic books, and it was really neat. You know, it was really kind of cool that Fox was presenting, because by that time, by 1986, we were 9 years after the revolution that Star Wars really brought to fantasy filmmaking. And after Star Wars, 20th Century Fox followed that up 2 years later with the original Alien. And to me, the idea of verisimilitude in science fiction films was, I mean, 2001 had it, but 2001 was very clinical, and it was trying to show us what space travel might really look like. Whereas Star Wars showed us fantasy worlds that felt very real and very lived in. So it really changed the paradigm of what a science fiction movie or a fantasy film could be in terms of its verisimilitude, its believability, its quality of being real. Alien continued that, another 20th Century Fox movie. And I think at the end of the 70s there, 20th Century Fox obviously been responsible for the Planet of the Apes franchise. I mean, 9 years before Star Wars came out. I mean, it's crazy to think about. But the original Planet of the Apes came out in 68. Star Wars came out in 77. So you're looking at a 9-year period of time between the original Planet of the Apes and Star Wars. So 20th Century Fox, then 2 years later, they gave us Alien. And, Alien also, no one had ever seen, I mean, people say that it was, inspired by Mario Bava's Planet of the Vampires, which may be true. By the way, that 4K from Germany, mwah, chef's kiss. Thank you, Lamberto Bava. Your father would be proud of what you did with that. But I think that, the Alien franchise was, I mean, no one had ever seen, the same way that Star Wars was revolutionary in terms of space fantasy. I think Alien, I mean, I consider Alien, while it's a science fiction film, sure, it's a horror movie. It's body horror. And it is, I mean, as a matter of fact, the chest burster scene, I mean, we talk about it, but you think about it, it's a long time ago. It's what, 46 years ago? I mean, that's a long time ago. 46 years ago, 44 years ago. And at the time, it was, again, peak verisimilitude. I mean, I know if you're looking for wires or something, you'd find them. I guess you can't find them now in the 4K version, but if you watch the 4K version of Alien, it looks like it was shot yesterday. I mean, the Ridley Scott's mise en scène, the way it was photographed, the actors. Again, the cast of Alien, and one of the things that you cannot scoff at, and people have brought this up in terms of Alien Romulus, is that the collection of actors, Yaphet Kotto, Tom Skerritt, Veronica Cartwright, Sigourney Weaver, Harry Dean Stanton, John Hurt. I mean, the characters, and Ian Holm, the characters that they got, the actors looked like real people. I have often said that one of my problems, especially with youth movies today, is people are way too good looking. Everybody is so gorgeous that it's the verisimilitude of youth films kind of ended for me. I always tell people, even though people look a little old, Jaws 2, the kids are kind of goofy. Molly Ringwald was not a conventional California beauty when she was in Pretty in Pink. John Cryer as Ducky, not exactly the most classically handsome man, but could you see anyone else in that part? I mean, even Matthew Broderick, handsome kid in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, he was believable. Alan Ruck, same thing. I mean, Sloane Peterson, she was believable too, because they looked like real people. And one of the things about Alien was, like, these were blue-collar, oil rig truckers. I mean, the way they acted, the dialogue. Let's talk about the bonus situation. I want to eat something else, but this right now food will do. I mean, you bought all into that. Why do you fall right? I mean, the whole Alien was great, and I remember seeing that in the theater, and it was just as senses shattering as seeing Star Wars. I mean, I was terrified. And one of the things that I loved about Alien, and one of the things I always bang on about in terms of verisimilitude, is even though movies are entirely made up, there's nothing in them that's real. Everything is contrived. Everything is made up. Everything is created. You're seeing what is in the proscenium of the frame. It was built. It was put there by technicians, craftspeople. It's not real. But if movies do their job well, you believe it. Even the idea that we as film goers, we forget that there's actually a camera that's been placed to get those shots. And if you really start thinking about the fact that there's a camera there, you ruin the whole illusion. I mean, we know there's a camera there subconsciously, but not when you're watching a movie. You're watching a story unfold. And I've often said on this channel, I've always said on this channel, that the greatest fiction has to be the most truthful, because fiction has to make you believe, which means the people that are telling you the story, they have to have that magic pixie dust. And there is a bit of alchemy in making movies too. I mean, the way you shoot things, the difference between a camera being at face level or being just shy of face level looking up can be the difference between a boring shot if the horizon is in the middle. But if it's up here, then it's interesting. But, David Lynch or John Ford was right about that, because the way things are presented, you have to believe them. And in a movie, if a costume isn't right, if an accent isn't right, somebody was bitching about how bad the movie Prince of Thieves was, Kevin Costner's Robin Hood, that they didn't remember. I think it was my friend, was it Darren? No, was it Darren Doctorman? I'm not sure. I don't remember. I saw somebody and then people were commenting, so I don't remember who actually was watching it. But, their verisimilitude, it's all over the place in that movie. And I think that when you look at things like Star Wars and Alien and Empire Strikes Back and James Cameron's Aliens, I mean, what's really funny is if you look at Aliens, the characters seem a little bit over the top, but we believe them because it's following up on a long tradition of jarhead movies and war films, and we've met characters like that. I mean, they're the Dirty Dozen, they're Platoon, whatever. We know what those characters are like, and they felt real. James Cameron is very good at making the everyman real or the every Navi real. You believe it. And there are just some filmmakers. What's really my favorite director is Stanley Kubrick, and everything he does is incredibly stylized. He's not necessarily looking for naturalism. He's almost like anti-verisimilitude, and yet his movies are absolutely believable. Even something like Dr. Strangelove, you buy into it. Even though he does things that are mannered, it's a trick, but that's why he goes on the other end of the spectrum, but at the same time because his fiction is so truthfully presented that he can be as stylized as he wants to be. His center point photography, he frames something and then he frames a subject within the exterior frame that he's made. It's amazing. And yet you still buy into it. So truthful fiction is my favorite fiction. The best fiction is the most truthful. And I've always felt that way. And we all know it. Whether we can articulate it or not, we feel it. Do you believe it? Like, for instance, we talked about on the John Campy show, the Acolyte trailer today. I didn't hate it, but I looked at it and I'm like, here's the thing. People are like, oh, Rob, it's a first trailer. I hate that we've now decided to make excuses for things based on how we're now conditioned to see trailers. Here's the thing. Here's what a trailer or a teaser or whatever you want to call it, here's what it should do. It should tell you something intriguing about whatever the story is that's going to unfold. This, I would say that the Alien, we did not see a trailer, we saw a teaser. What did the teaser for Alien Romulus do? It told us, oh yes, we're back in the familiar Alien universe as it was established in 1979 with Alien. The technology looks similar. We have a pulse rifle from Aliens. Alien and Aliens are two movies both made by auteurs that had very, very strong visions. Like so many other franchises, the Alien 3 went off the rails because the producers of that movie didn't know what kind of a movie they were going to make. They had an auteur, Vincent Ward, was going to direct a version of Alien on a wooden planet with monks. I think if he had been able to make his vision of the movie, it might have been quite spectacular and interesting. Now, David Fincher is an auteur as well, but he really wasn't given any power and he didn't have a whole lot of input. The producers fucked him on that movie. If you really want to get, and I will recommend this, if you don't have the Blu-ray set of the Alien anthology, get it, because my friend Charlie Lazarica's documentary documentaries on all the making of the Alien movies on that set they're superlative, and you have to get them. They're a must-own. I think the documentary is called Rape and Ruin. I don't know if you had to change that title, or I don't remember, but the documentary on the making of Alien 3 is fascinating. But Alien and Aliens are so great because they were highly controlled by the people that made them. Then the Alien franchise kind of went off the rails, and then, you wind up getting Alien versus Predator, which the very conception of that was a bastardization of both franchises. So it didn't work. And it's frustrating because we know it doesn't work. There's all this goofy stuff in it, like, oh, we're on a pyramid where the predators and aliens used to fight, or what. It's just so ridiculous. But the great thing about the first Alien is Alien is a cautionary tale, and what I loved about it is, I know Lovecraft was a racist, and I know he was a horrible anti-Semite and all that, but the cosmic horror, the unknowable cosmic horror of things we can barely conceive of, was something that always intrigued me, because so much of the universe, all of the universe, in fact, we will never know. Humanity will never know. So what I loved about Alien, I think it was my favorite thing about Alien, not so much the xenomorph, which was incredibly realized, and the life cycle and all of that, but what I thought was really intriguing the first time I saw it was the space jockey. Like, someone else encountered these creatures, or was bringing, it was a whole ship full of thousands of eggs, so they knew what they were carrying. Where were they going? Why did they have all those eggs? Now, I understand that Ridley Scott said, hey, who was that guy? Who was a space jockey? We should never have known. That should have been one of the great mysteries of life. Who was that space jockey? Where was that derelict alien craft going? The whole point of Alien, what I loved about Alien, was we were never going to know. We were never going to know. As a matter of fact, if Mother hadn't stopped, or if Wayland Yutani, that's why I was wearing this shirt today, if Wayland Yutani hadn't sent, and make no mistake, the Nostromo was sent there. They might not have known that, but they were. Ash knew. It was a mission. But when we were never supposed to know. No one was going to know. And that's what made that so terrifying. We weren't meant to know. And this idea that Prometheus, it was so funny because the idea, Prometheus is a great idea. It's not exactly a groundbreaking idea. Everyone's been talking about ancient aliens for years. I mean, when I was a kid, I saw the Sun Classic picture, The Outer Space Connection, Mysterious Monsters, The Lincoln Conspiracy, In Search of Historic Jesus, In Search of Noah's Ark. I love those movies. They finally made Hangar 18. But the cosmic unknowability of the Alien franchise was something that was really appealing and truthful, and because we're never going to know, we're just not. But that whole idea of ancient astronauts, and then so Ridley Scott had to go in and say, okay, well, now I've got to explain it all, and then he ruined it. And what's funny was, I love Ridley Scott's movies, I do, but the fact that he has his theatrical versions, and then I get it. And now he's been trying to make as many movies as he can before he can't make movies anymore. I understand that. He's fighting against time, but he's made some great movies. I mean, I think Alien is one of my favorite movies of all time. The Martian is certainly one of my favorite movies of all time. I love Thelma and Louise. I'm a defender of The Counselor. Come at me, bro. I really enjoy Ridley Scott's movies. I enjoy watching them. Of course, we don't. Blade Runner. Blade Runner is not as good a movie as everybody says it is, but it's an interesting, beautiful vision. People really love that movie because I'm convinced of this. I know it's sacrilege to say, because it is an incredible, groundbreaking movie, and I dare say it's one of the most influential movies ever made, because we're still seeing movies that emulate it 40 years after the fact, but it's not very good. If you look at the movie, it feels really good. It's mesmerizing to watch. Vangelis' score is beautiful. Everything about it is a beautiful movie, but as a movie, it's a little muddled and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But at the end, the one speech, when it comes right down to it, everyone feels it. I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. We all know it. We all love it. But so anyway, when he decided to make Prometheus, to me, he took all of the uniqueness out of it. And because Damon Lindelof came on and rewrote John Spaihts' script, it was made monumentally dunder-headed. And these ideas that ancient aliens came to Earth and seeded our planet or whatever, we just throw some DNA in a river and hence life sprouts up from the Earth. It doesn't work that way. A biosphere has to evolve together. And then it all went kind of nowhere. And then it turns out that the xenomorphs were created by a paranoid alien or android from Earth. Something like that. I mean, it was so disappointing. And it completely demystified the entire Alien franchise. So the Alien Romulus trailer, to me, brought back the cosmic horror nature of it. I mean, sure. Does it look like you've got another crew of characters that are just a little bit better looking being chased around a ship again? Yeah. But the name Romulus is intriguing. And so I'm curious to see where it all goes. But Fede Alvarez, in my mind, Fede Alvarez gets the benefit of the doubt. Because I was dubious about the Evil Dead remake, and I was dubious about Don't Breathe. The Evil Dead remake and Don't Breathe, he knows how to tell truthful fictional tales. And I will, so he's earned, and I think he's earned all of ours, all of you imagination connoisseurs out there, he's earned our respect and our trust until he loses it. So I'm going to say, knowing Steve Asbell at 20th Century Fox or 20th Century Studios as president was overseeing this, and it's funny because he won't commit. Like I've said to him, dude, I said to him on a text exchange, you better not fuck this up. And he goes, I hope I didn't. Boy, I hope you didn't too. I hope you didn't. There's two, Steve. But I trust him. Because he's brought a luster back. That's why I'm excited about Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. That's why I'm excited about the first Omen. It's got some really interesting people working on it. And Alien Romulus, I really liked the way it looked. I just think the sets needed to be a little smokier, and we needed some more film grain. But other than that, it looks great, so I can't wait. But now I wanted to share some articles, because the thing about the Alien franchise that I think has wrecked it is its own canon. And I keep talking about canon. And to me, canon and truth go hand in hand when it comes to fiction, especially in our IPs. Canon is what makes our fiction true, adhering to canon. Because once you have more than one movie or more than one story, canon becomes important. It becomes your truth. So I wanted to talk about a lot of this, and I wanted to read a few articles. I found some articles. Go figure. Found some articles to do these philosophical conversations because I just can't wax rhapsodic. I'm going to start and read a few articles. And this is from a website called helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com. I don't know if I've ever gone here before, but I just, I was doing these cursory searches, and look what I found. Your fiction may be failing for one simple reason. You're not being honest. This is a short one. Writers talk a lot about being honest, being vulnerable, pouring ourselves into our writing and not being self-conscious in our writing. But what does it all really mean? And how can flunking any of the above be the reason your fiction may be failing? What is honest fiction? Let's begin by asking the obvious question. What is honest fiction? What does that even mean? It's a buzzword, sure. But all that means is that it has essentially become a cliche. Often cliches have deep meanings that everyone fails to see simply because we're so used to not looking past the surface. Honest fiction is one truthful fiction. Nobel Prize-winning author Albert Camus famously said, "Fiction is the lie through which we tell the truth." Good fiction is always going to be true fiction. Honesty in fiction begins by presenting premises, situations, reactions, and ramifications that are true not only in the sense that the necessary facts are correct, but also true in a way that resonates with the universal reality of morality. This has nothing to do with the character making prescribed right choices and everything to do with presenting the effects and costs of those choices with authenticity and candor. Mario Puzo's Godfather is one of the most time-honored examples of this. Fiction, I wouldn't say Mario Puzo's Godfather. I would say the Godfather movie that Mario Puzo worked on with Francis Ford Coppola is, where his novel isn't. 2, fiction that has nothing to do with personal convictions. There's a Chinese proverb that says there are 3 truths: your truth, my truth, and the truth. Honesty in fiction is never about presenting your truth. It's about presenting the truth by first being true to your character's truths. This means that if your story has you putting words into the mouth of someone whose principles and convictions are antithetical to your own, you must still be able to present that character's ideals in a completely authentic way. Do you hate your bad guy? If so, you're not doing a good job of writing him. To write characters well, to write them honestly, we must be able to put ourselves into their skins and brains and understand them so completely, even in their objective reprehensibility, that we can love them even as we love ourselves. This absolutely doesn't mean you have to agree with him or condone his actions, but it does mean you have to step away from the subjectivity of your own personal pulpit and instead try and write from his subjective perspective. This is something romantic suspense author Kristen Heitzman always does masterfully in the vignettes told from her antagonist's point of view. I don't know these books, but hey, I'm willing to learn. Personal fiction. You know how you're always being told to write what you know? That line of advice isn't talking about writing stories based only on your life experiences. All write what you know really means is be honest. This is where all the encouragements to fight through your fears and be vulnerable in your writing come into play. Why? Because being honest in your fiction means digging down into the core of yourself and finding the part of you that understands and resonates with sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes embarrassing, and sometimes downright scary stuff. Being honest and vulnerable doesn't mean you have to tell all of your deepest, darkest secrets. It doesn't mean you have to tell everyone about the time you went sleepwalking in your underwear. But it does mean that when you write about your characters experiencing any kind of emotion, whether it's a good or bad emotion, you have to be able to dig down within yourself and tap into that embarrassment or whatever that you felt and use it to convey your character's similar experience without censorship. This is one of the chief things I appreciate in the Bourne series, which always show the emotional fallout from Bourne's actions and decisions. Signs you're not being honest in your fiction. When most of us hear the admonitions to write honest fiction, we all nod our heads emphatically. Yep, that is so important. I totally believe in being honest in my fiction. I, for one, nod my head. I'm emphatic, but if I'm really being sincere with myself, I have to admit that writing honest fiction is way harder than just pinning on the honesty merit badge. It's not something we accomplish just because we believe in it. Honesty in fiction is ridiculously hard work. It only happens when we're actively thinking about it and consciously pursuing it with every word we write. And part of the reason this is so tricky is that honesty in fiction isn't always the most expedient way to serve the plot, have fun, or entertain readers. In an October 2015 interview with the writer, playwright and screenwriter Donald Margulies notes that sometimes we can unintentionally create a jarring note within the honesty of our work simply by adding scenes, lines of dialogue, or jokes that are at odds with the honesty of the piece, but which we have a hard time deleting because they give us a personal kind of pleasure. In other words, we're not killing our darlings. He says, "The thing that I absolutely live by is you have to tell the truth. I know that sounds very simplistic, but I think that if you're enjoying yourself too much, and if you're intruding too much on a character or the voice of a character, or if you find that you're stepping back from that character and that situation and you're commenting on it, you're not doing your job. You need to be as true and as emphatic to that moment as possible. You can't be at a remove." What honesty in fiction feels like. I want to be honest in my fiction, but I admit it. Most of the time, I just write. The character is doing something or saying something, and I'm just letting the words pour out without necessarily pausing to check on how honest they are. But every once in a while, a scene comes along that demands I dig a little deeper. One of those scenes, irrevocably burned into my memory, is the midpoint battle scene in my Portal fantasy Dreamlander. A critique partner told me the early versions of this scene just weren't cutting it. They were too surface, too bland, too ordinary. I needed to dig deeper. Instead of starting to write right away, I sat there for a few moments and thought, well, this was the scene in which my protagonist was entering a full-scale battle for the first time. His reaction to this experience was not in itself crucial to the story, but realistically, this was a life-changing event. It wasn't honest of me to allow him to breeze through the experience without his undergoing some massive reactions. I asked myself, if I were the one riding into this battle, what would I be feeling? And the result was one of the best scenes I've ever written. My editor loved it. My critique partners loved it. In the scene more than any other, it is this scene more than any other that is always mentioned specifically in reviews. I dug deep, I was honest, and it resonated with readers. Plot whisperer Martha Alderson tweeted recently, dig for truth in writing. Often what first comes is surface and what you've been taught or picked up from others. Authentic truth is deeper. My surface reaction to that battle scene in Dreamlander was to write the stock action hero stuff, where the character is tough and awesome and nothing phases him. The authentic truth was that he would be overwhelmed by the sensory stimuli to the point that he would be almost at a remove from it, as if he were an observer of his own actions. I think about that scene often, not because it turned out so great, but rather because it remains a reminder and a challenge to me to always go the extra mile, dig a little deeper, and look beyond the easy surface cliches to find the honest, emotional truth at the heart of all my scenes. If you've ever worried your fiction may be failing, challenge yourself to search out the truth, big or small, in every scene you write. So that was, I thought, a pretty nice encapsulation. Now, I'll tell you, for me, when I talk about verisimilitude, I'm not just talking about how something looks, I'm also talking about how something feels. And I'll give you an example of something that made me want to fucking jump out a window. I don't know if you ever saw the TV series The Leftovers on HBO. You know? So in The Leftovers, the idea is 2% of the world's population were Thanos. They just upped and disappeared like a fart in the wind. No one knew where they went, and so we were dealing with the people and the ramifications of what would happen if many of your friends and loved ones just poof. You know, Carrie Coon, who's great in the show, lost her whole family. You know, there was no rhyme or reason to it. But one of the characters, the main character's father, Scott Glenn, former cop, our main character is a cop. Scott Glenn is hearing voices in his head. And he's talking to them, and they're telling him things. He's learning things from the voices in his head. And in the show, the main character, whose dad is hearing these voices, never once sits his dad down and says, okay, we live in a world where 2% of the population of Earth, people I know and love, have just vanished. And the world's gotten a little wacky. And you're hearing voices in your head that are telling you things that are coming true. Things are going. I would like to sit you down, Dad, and I would try and I would like to have a conversation with the voices in your head. Can we both sit down and talk to them? Because once 2% of the population of the world has disappeared, all bets are off. I'm a cop. You're hearing voices. There's a lot of things that are telling you that are truthful, that are coming true. Let's sit down and talk to these people. I don't know who they are. I don't know why you're hearing them. I don't know why they're living in your head, whatever. But maybe, as crazy as it might seem, they never did that in the show. And this is all in the first season. And I'm like, what? Please do this. Please do this. Please, because I'm waiting as a rational human being, an audience member. I'm like, and it made me, that show was a show, it was the first show, even before Manifest, it was a show I hate watched. Beautifully made, terrific performances, but I'm like, it's, you know, the Damon Lindelof's, the J.J. Abrams School of Mystery Boxing and all, and it was based in a book by the same guy who wrote Little Children. I love that movie. So, and I read the book, and there was no explanation. But anyway, so the show ran 3 seasons. It drove me crazy, and I felt I was being lied to. I'm like, why are the creators of the TV show, why are they treating me like a little bitch? please, same thing was true of Lost. We all watched Lost, and I stuck with it. It got really great, till season 6. I think the end season of Lost was one of the great betrayals in audience history. Like the X-Files, they just kept writing shit. They never sat down. They never charted out and figured, what are we doing here? What's actually happening? And I kept waiting. When I was watching Lost. I wanted them to do an episode. And maybe, some people say, well, Rob, you can't get everything you want. But there was so much crazy shit happening. People are traveling through time. Nobody sat down and ever had an honest conversation. And no one ever said, can you believe the fucking shit that's going on this island? Like, no one ever sat down and talked to one another about the insanity of what they were experiencing. And it bothered me because that was not truthful. And you could tell it never happened off screen. They just didn't ever wanted to waste time. And it got to the point where they just kept throwing so many questions out that, and the show itself had one question to answer. They were lost, but where were they? What was the island? And I don't think from the opening question they're asking, where are we? Why are we here? What is the purpose of this place? And that led me to have to create, and so many of us create in our own minds, what we think it should be, what we hope it should be. In my mind, I've said it on the show before, and I still believe this. It's just, to me, the people that made the show fucked up, which is arrogant and stupid to say, but in my mind, I think a lot of us fans feel this way about whatever our favorite thing is that goes off the rails. We don't understand why the creators haven't seen it. Did they just give up? Did they not? When the creators spend less time thinking about their shows than you do, there's a problem. And with Lost, I was like, okay, wouldn't it be interesting? This in my own mind. This is what I thought the island was. The island was God's thumbprint. Whether you believe in God, call it what you want, the creator, whatever. I like the idea of God in fiction. I like religions in fiction to be true. Give me the pantheon of gods. It's like catnip for me. I'm working on a story like that right now, a screenplay actually. But to me, the island was God's thumbprint on his creation, on the creation of the human race, on Earth, whatever. And it was the one thing he just left there. And all of his powers, and the island was a crucible. And if you first of all, if you found yourself on the island, something catastrophic, something very strange that already was going on, you find yourself on the island, and if you survive and then you manage to get off the island with all the wackiness that's happening, you have something of value. You have gained insight into humanity that most people don't have. And then you go out into the world, and hopefully you can make humanity be better by bringing your experience with you. The people you touch, that's what I thought the island was in my mind. They never addressed it, and they just went off in another direction. I mean, the idea of faith and science. John Locke, they killed him. He's the smoke monster. So the interesting philosophical debate. Anyway, that to me is an example of bad fiction, because the people making Lost, there was no truth there. They didn't know what the island was, and it's maddening when we invest time into something, because here's the thing. Even though something isn't real, if it's completely made up, once you have it in your mind, stories are how we sort of codify our own existence. And a great piece of fiction is just as real as a story that your sibling or your parents or your friend told you about something that happened yesterday. An actual event, when it's been conveyed to you, your best friend calls you up, they're pissed off, whatever's happened, caught my wife cheating, or somebody hit my car, whatever it is, that becomes a story that they're conveying to you. And some people are good storytellers, some people aren't so good. But your friends that are good storytellers have taken something that happened to them, and they've turned it into a piece of fiction. Even though it's truthful fiction, they're telling you their version of this thing that happened to them, the way they feel about it. And you weren't there. So it's as real, it becomes as real to you, even though intellectually it's from a friend of yours and it actually happened. Because you never saw it, it's just a story. Now, you can see the emotional fallout through your friend, but it's just a story. And if you've read like Donna Tartt's The Secret History, a book that I dearly love that I still haven't forgotten, I'm still talking about it. You know, I still think about that book all the time. And I never quite had a college experience or a college professor like that's detailed in The Secret History. But that book has resonated with me, and I've incorporated it into who I am as a person. And we do the same thing with our favorite movies. I mean, I know that Captain America, the Winter Soldier isn't real. However, as far as a Captain America story goes and a Captain America movie goes, I really bought into that film. You know, it incorporated all these different 70s spy movies, you know, having Robert Redford as the villain being exposed. I mean, they were smart because the people that made that movie, they brought all that baggage with them. And what's interesting was it's a Captain America movie, but in hiring Robert Redford, if you're a savvy audience member, the filmmakers got this, the Russo brothers knew this, Marvel knew this, Kevin Feige knew this. By hiring Robert Redford, you're bringing along 3 Days of the Condor, which means you're bringing along Max von Sydow's character. You're bringing along All the President's Men. You know, you're bringing along that. Think about your 70s conspiracy thriller movies. Robert Redford, you know, the head of Hydra or whatever, also brings with him those films that were inspiring to the people that made Winter Soldier. So his presence and the presence of other movies he was in give him gravitas, and having him in Captain America, the Winter Soldier brought a truth to it wouldn't have had otherwise. Now, a lot of people that watch Captain America, Winter Soldier don't know anything about 3 Days of the Condor. They've never seen All the President's Men. They don't know what any of that is. You know, they wouldn't know what is Max von Sydow's character. There's a great, I don't want to ruin it for you, but he explains something to Robert Redford's character at the end of the movie that is absolutely chilling. And that one conversation, if you remember that, going back into that movie, into Winter Soldier, has a lot more resonance. So the filmmakers, just like James Cameron brings in our knowledge of, if we weren't in the military, our experience of the military comes through the movies and TV that we've seen. And so if it makes it authentic sounding, it feels real, you know? And so those jarheads, the Space Marines, they were portrayed in such a way that because they feel real, they become resonant. I mean, even, look, if you've seen Alien and you hear Jeanette Goldstein, you hear her voice as Vasquez, you still can know what she said. Hey, Vasquez, have you ever been mistaken for a man? No. Have you? You know, come on, we remember all that stuff. Let's rock! You remember, you hear the reality of that fiction sticks in your head and it doesn't go anywhere. And because it's truthful. And it's the truth that we remember. And so, like, brings me back because I didn't finish my thoughts about the Acolyte trailer. So, a teaser trailer, what I was going to say is that a trailer has one job. It is to make you interested in seeing whatever it is it's promoting. Because it's going to show you something. And how does it do that? It does that by, if it's, say you're seeing something that's a sequel, like Alien. What you want from a trailer for Alien is that you want to be promised the chills and the thrills that you get from a great Alien movie. We have two Alien movies that people will always agree are two of the greatest films ever made in that particular genre. Aliens is a war film. Alien is a straight up haunted house in space horror movie. We know what those are. That's your baseline. So you've got to promise us in a 1 minute Alien teaser that we're going to get an experience that is maybe not going to equal, but be in the same ballpark as Alien or Aliens. That's what you're giving us. That's what you're promising us. The trailer for Alien Romulus did just that. Now, it looks like, that looks like an Alien movie. Now, here's my question. And the next thing I would want, this is just a teaser, it's just a minute long, but what gets me to go in, okay, now I know that the movies, it looks and feels like Alien. But now you have to give me, the next thing you have to give me is an intellectual reason why you, as filmmakers, made this movie, and you have to have a story to tell me that somehow is going to enhance my understanding of whatever this IP is, which is the Alien IP, or it's going to take me a place that I didn't get to go in Alien or Aliens. because James Cameron took us a very different place than Alien, but they both fit together in the same universe. They both feel honest. Just like Star Wars and Empire are different movies, but they delivered on their promise. The problem with a lot of IPs today is the people that are making them don't really know how to do that. And we have too many examples of entries in IPs that are, well, monumentally disappointing. Now, I would say this when it comes to something like the Acolyte trailer. We are told that this is a story about the Sith. All I know about the Acolyte trailer, forget who made it. I like Russian Doll. I put aside everything you know about Star Wars and go into this trailer. As I do with every trailer, I go in totally open-minded. What I wanted is I wanted them to show me something. We've seen a lot in the Star Wars universe. I've read a lot of books, read a lot of comics, seen all the Star Wars movies countless times. I wanted to see something from that trailer that I hadn't seen before. That's all I wanted. I hadn't seen before. That trailer opens, and it shows me the Jedi Temple. In fact, it looked like the Jedi Council Temple, but there's younglings in there. And I'm looking at this, and the Jedi says, well, I'm getting a lesson about close your eyes. I'm out, to be honest. I'm out. I'm like, okay, first of all, this takes place in a different era. It'd be like, here's the thing that I saw. Here's the thing, and here's what I was thinking when I first saw the Acolyte trailer. It's supposed to take place during the time of the High Republic. Well, no one knows what the High Republic is unless you read the comics and read the books. But let's say you didn't. You have to explain to your audience what the High Republic is. The High Republic is a different era. There's prosperity. There is peace. There are no wars in the stars during the time of the High Republic. Everything is hunky-dory. It's a very different thing. So your first thing is to tell me, where is this set and why is it different from everything else I've already seen? There is nothing in that trailer. I mean, people are like, oh, it's Carrie-Anne Moss as a Jedi. Look, Carrie-Anne Moss as a Jedi is not, like, that's kind of cool. So you get Trinity as a Jedi. I mean, that's a fan mashup. Don't we love that? Woo! There's nothing in the whole Acolyte trailer that, one, addresses what it's actually about. And people are saying, well, Rob, you're going to find out in the full trailer. I'm out. The trailer for the Acolyte, I'm out. Now, people that love Star Wars, and I know a lot of them, I stream with a lot of them, they're always going to give it a pass. I don't. I don't have to give it a pass. I will watch this stuff. But when I watch this Acolyte trailer, I'm like, there's no truth here. There's no truth, because if they're actually delving into what is the Sith, what are the Sith, what are they doing, all they did was show us something we've seen countless times before in Star Wars. So to me, it was a bad trailer. And for whatever reason, I watched that trailer, and when it was over, I'm like, well, I don't have to watch that. I'll just listen to somebody tell me what it was about. Oh, that's interesting. Because whatever is in that show, anything that's interesting about that show was not in that trailer. Now, there's a lot of people who are going to say, I liked it. I don't begrudge you liking it, because there's iconography that is immediately, if you're a Star Wars fan, someone ignites a lightsaber and you get that feeling. I understand. I know. But for me, I need truth in my fiction. To me, what I saw in that Acolyte trailer wasn't truthful. It was just showing me stuff. There was no point of view. There was nothing intellectually interesting about it other than somebody's got a knife and is attacking people that have lightsabers or force powers or whatever. I don't know one thing. Oh, well, Rob, it's just a teaser trailer. No. The job of a teaser trailer is to get me, because I can't speak for anyone else, but me. And I'm an astute viewer that's loved Star Wars for the better part of 50 years since it came out. That trailer did nothing for me. And I was disappointed. When it was done, I felt bad. Now, the people that made that trailer and made the show, they approved that trailer. And that means that they believe that that trailer is going to get people on board. They believe, because remember, as a business decision, trailers are marketing. They're all about business. They're all about making money. And when I see a trailer that's that lackluster, and some people can like it, and I understand that, but I'm telling you, listen to the Bobster here. It's not a good trailer because it doesn't tell you why is the Acolyte different than one issue of Tales of the Jedi that Dark Horse published 25 years ago. I don't know. There's nothing in that. I don't even hear, like, the only reason it's remotely interesting is because we know it's supposed to be about a Sith adept or whatever. And to me, I wanted to see something truthful. Being Star Wars isn't enough anymore. It isn't. And I felt angry about that. And maybe that's a failing of my own. I don't know. But I was disappointed. Now I have a second article I want to read. And this comes from the fans section again of Medium. And I love this. The Permanence in the Imaginary by Ben Ulanzi. Ben Ulanzi wrote this. Canon, Art, and Where We Find Meaning. I mean, whether Jesus is real or not, he's had a bigger impact on the world than any of us have. And the same could be said of Bugs Bunny and Superman and Harry Potter. They've changed my life, changed the way I act on Earth. But doesn't that make them kind of real? They might be imaginary, but they're more important than most of us here. And they're all going to be around long after we're dead. The fictional Kyle Broflovsky. The concept of canon is strange when you start to unpack it. Though its definitions vary, it most often refers to the legitimate lines of events housed within fictional universes. For Potterheads, the 7 Harry Potter books and Fantastic Beasts series are considered to be canon, whereas Harry Potter and the Cursed Child and fan fiction diverge from the established lore, each factoid encased within the Hogwarts septology and Fantastic Beasts trilogy is part of that world's canon. Essentially, canon refers to the authoritative narratives within fiction. When stories are sufficiently well known, verifying the events that take place within each becomes as simple as a Google search. Whether or not an event happened in the Lord of the Rings universe is a matter of fact, so to speak. The worlds of Tolkien's fictional languages come equipped with the words of Tolkien's fictional languages come equipped with real translations. The stories impart real meaning. And you'll see why I picked this article to go with the other one. Albert Camus once said, "Fiction is the lie through which we tell the truth, after all." Even in conversations about fiction, there are apparent gradations of truth. One can be more right than the other about the wondrous events depicted by long-dead storytellers. People can care enough about a made-up world to argue each plot point until they're apoplectic. There's no detail too mundane to retain. Even in the face of our finite futures, there's no trivia unworth devoting our time to. But it doesn't matter where any of this is real. Even the Elysian knolls of Hobbiton are hills worth dying on if you're a big enough Tolkien fan. Shared fandoms can even create communities. For a proper Potterhead, they'll find a friend in a flying flag. They'll find a friend in a flying flag for any Hogwarts house. Luke Skywalker isn't a real person, but there is an established lore around him, and to misspeak it in certain circles is a sin tantamount to heresy. Santa Claus isn't real, but the image he conjures is. The culture around his jolly peregrinations across the globe is an inextricable part of the holiday, inextricable part of the holiday experience, even for adults. The characters of Westeros aren't real, and yet I've found myself Googling their siblings and ancestors. When I have, I've found results as defined as just about any family tree I've ever looked at. When I wonder on a whim which house of Hogwarts Dumbledore was in as a student, Siri casually confirms Gryffindor, as though it were a fact as plain as gravity. When Rowling wrote it, it became part of an intractable canon. The people portrayed in books, cartoons, and movies aren't always tangible, but in the common experience we have with their stories, they each rise in a weird sort of a way to something that feels more than fictional. They're ideas that can transcend borders, And whether canon or not, ideas are real. The image of Harry and his wand conjures something nearly as universal as Christ on the cross. It's almost irrelevant that his face-off with Voldemort never actually took place. The symbolism of his world means something, no matter if you're in Brazil, China, Siberia, or New Guinea. Harry is no realer than the Tooth Fairy, and yet we care about his world. We debate the character's motives. We research the reasons why events unfolded the way they did. How did Harry survive Voldemort's spell in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows? What happened to Zuko's mom in Avatar: The Last Airbender? Why is Jack Torrance in the photo at the end of The Shining? We know deep down that none of this is real, but we care to know the answers all the same. We'll wade through Reddit boards until we learn why fictional characters did fictional things. And we do it because these stories matter to us. Whether or not stories really, truly matter is a question that rises to something surprisingly philosophical. It's a question that brings all of our creations into review. From stories to songs, symphonies, sculptures, and murals, whether any of it matters is a quandary that overarches nearly everything we do as humans. It's hard not to struggle with a certain nihilism when we consider the most abrasive truths, that we're tiny ants scrambling around on a space rock, that a century isn't very long on a cosmic scale, and a lifetime is very, very short, that the eventual death of the universe will one day render every pursuit purposeless. It's true that our stories are bound to dissipate. Grass will grow in the impact craters they leave, and their echoes will one day fade into a muted oblivion. I want my words to defy those impossible odds, but I realize that likelihood isn't great. Oftentimes I confine myself to the most brooding tones and serious subjects in the selfish hope that my words might manage to achieve some staying power, that their tenure here might be a little less fleeting, or serve a role in some greater fight. But everything I've ever written may only be buried by a mountain of AI drivel. Maybe my words are only as good as the lives of my hard drives. Perhaps the paper they're printed on is their only shot at permanence. If I say them to the cloud, will they survive atomic warfare? Surely it can't be asking too much that my stories outlast the roaches. The reason that most universal subjects can endure at least as long as the tortoise in Finding Nemo. Sometimes I'm still drawn toward the inconsequential. The weighty is too much to bear. So I relinquish the load. I set aside the Herculean sum of it all to watch Pixar movies and play video games. I spend precious hours laughing at South Park and lying in the sun and waxing poetic about the Arcadian plains of virtual worlds. I write pieces that I know are destined for digital dustbins. I craft satirical nonsense about Club Penguin, underpaid Spider-Men, and terrorizing Floridians with dinosaur costumes. I pen pretentious reviews of cartoons that came out over a decade ago. And when I finish up my fourth Avatar: The Last Airbender-related piece, it's hard not to wrestle with the flashing neon, what's the point? I don't know, I have nothing new to add to the conversation about this revered show. Why should I even waste my time glomming onto the masses who've spent years and years extolling its every virtue 100 times over? What could I possibly contribute? Is this how I spend my limited time here on Earth? But these questions don't only plague creators. Whether our lives have meaning is something almost all of us wonder about at some point or another. It's a near guarantee that all of our life's accomplishments will amount to stardust. But creating and achieving and being is about that time until then. We find our meaning through whatever route's necessary and whatever seems appropriate, and each new day is an opportunity for new, needless nonsense. Whether in books, movies, or along an avenue all of our own, it falls on each of us to decide life's meaning. We give meaning to the meaningless, and ascribe value to the luminal. There are no correct answers for how to allocate our time here. If we spend it wandering the wilderness, immersed in someone else's stories, or busy creating our own, we'll rarely be sure-footed in our pursuits. Even while I know my achievements are unlikely to linger through the eons, it brightens each ephemeral moment to spend it lost in extraordinary places, laughing at fleeting nonsense and writing. They're among the million little things that give meaning to my impermanent corner of the great chaotic everything. Real or not, mindless Marvel movies and colorful made-up characters and fantastical worlds of fiction are each pieces of my strange puzzle called purpose. Canon or otherwise, stories tug at the very fabric of who we are as people and remind us that we're not alone in our search for meaning. They remind us that purpose is where we place it. Again, you can find the link to that article down in the description below. I agree. And that is why I think the internet is full of such vitriol from people. Because these stories that, and let's face it, I've talked about this before, they have colonized our own brains. We can't get rid of them. When a trailer for a Star Wars show drops or a Star Wars movie drops, Star Wars, rightly or wrongly, when I first saw it when I was a kid, and how much it meant to me, at least the first two Star Wars movies meant to me and meant to my worldview and my developing sense of self. Those characters you can't take them away. Han, Luke, Leia, R2, 3PO, Lando, Lobot, Darth Vader, the Emperor, Ben Kenobi. They can't ever leave. And if you become fans of, and you had Ralph McQuarrie's Star Wars portfolio images up on your wall. It goes all the way back to you fill your brains with these things. You can't get rid of them. It is an incurable disease. It's like herpes of the imagination. It's never going to go anywhere. And it might not have been, well, I won't go there, but it's there forever. And you know the truth of it. And the way that you absorb those things, whatever your jam is, whether it is Harry Potter, whether it's Star Wars, whether it's Doctor Who, whether it's Star Trek, whether it's James Bond, whether it's the books of William Gibson, or whether it's the books of Stephen Baxter, or it's the books of whoever you like reading, they're in your mind. And you know the difference between what's real and truthful in your fictional universe of your own mind and what isn't. And the frustrating part today is the things that they keep churning out, these IPs that we get excited about because we can't help it. I can't help getting excited about a show called The Acolyte. Can't. I have a Pavlovian response that will never go away. It's a new Star Wars thing. I wish I could not care. I can't not care. I can't. I have to care. I'm interested. Star Wars meant so much to me for so long, most of my life, as a matter of fact, that I can't walk away from it. But so often, especially since Disney's taken over the franchise, we have been given what I would call untruthful Star Wars fiction. Certainly Star Trek. Star Trek has been untruthful in my mind since... And Star Trek has always... there's been truthful Star Trek and untruthful Star Trek, but mostly truthful in its entire existence up until the end of an era that Roddenberry started. And even though he had nothing to do with Enterprise or Voyager or Deep Space Nine, because he died in 1991, those were still made by people that work with him, so that his DNA was there. And by the end of Enterprise, that DNA was completely, his light had been extinguished from the universe completely. And when it was taken over in Star Trek 09, they went back and they regurgitated what the creator himself had created. They went back to Kirk, Spock, and McCoy and gave us a new version. In my mind, that's the worst kind. It's the worst kind of going back and trying to tell stories and do it badly. Now, you might like those stories, but it's difficult to see something like that happen. And I think we as fans are going through it a lot because we're watching these franchises that have been around for 50 plus years, and we're watching people roll in and they're trying to change them into what they think they should be today, which, by the way, is inherently lying. It's I call it fraudulent creation, because you're taking something and by definition you're turning it into something it isn't, which is yours. And that's why it's so frustrating to watch. And it gets so angering to see things, whether it's, I mean, the funny thing is you have creators that are like, Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings is not a rote telling of Tolkien's work, but the spirit of it is there. And you can tell that Fran, Philippa, and Peter, when they were writing those scripts and making those movies, were trying to stay as close to the spirit of Tolkien that they could. Well, the people that made Rings of Power, for instance, they were not given, like, for instance, the Silmarillion. They're delving into Middle-earth's past, but they only had the rights to delve into the appendices that are in the Lord of the Rings books, which means they were hamstrung before they even started. The very premise of their show meant that they just had to make a bunch of shit up. They're going to make a bunch of shit up about Tolkien's universe. And anyone who's a fan who's actually read the notes and has actually read the Silmarillion is like, well, that's a bunch of bullshit. So you have people who are, whether you like Rings of Power or not, for people that are students or acolytes of Professor Tolkien and love his work, you can't help but dislike the show because it's fraudulent. It isn't truthful. It isn't truthful and it, by the way, it can't be by design because of the rights and the legalities and the reality of the world we live in. It could never be. It could never succeed, no matter how much they can try and make it emulate other stuff, like other fantasy stuff, and perhaps, maybe, but they were hamstrung from the beginning. Going back and trying to retell the tale. What's really interesting is if you look at a fictional construct like Star Wars now and Star Trek, our characters in real life, like you went from 1966 to 1994 with William Shatner playing James Tiberius Kirk through 3 seasons of television and 7 feature films and various video games. He wrote 10 novels with the Reeves Stevens about the character. So William Shatner's take on James T. Kirk is the only take. Now you can have, if you didn't live through that, I get it, and you might be able to watch somebody else. We now have Paul Wesley, and you've got, I think Chris Pine made a great Kirk. I think as an actor, he's charismatic. He was given dog shit to play, but he's a great Kirk. He could have been a great Kirk. But the real question is, why did you go back and do that? Why would you try and recreate something? Because there's very few characters that have played a fictional character, or very few actors that have played a fictional character for that long of a period of time, where you actually watch them grow old in their career to the point where they go into middle age. I mean, it's really interesting. You look at Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. I mean, that takes place years after Star Trek the Motion Picture, and Star Trek the Motion Picture takes place about 5 years in canonical time after the end of Star Trek, but you're still dealing with questions of middle age and getting older and all that. So the characters went from being youthful, and we watched them grow over the course of, in Shatner's case, just shy of 30 years. 30 years. So why, in our limited time, they've only been making movies and TV shows with sound for less than 100. So a good chunk of the time, 33%, call it, of the time that movies and TV have existed as an entertainment art form, William Shatner played that same character. And Star Trek has proven you can create all new characters and new situations and move forward. Yet the people that are making modern Star Trek have spent all this time in an era where we've already been. So all they're doing is telling fraudulent stories that aren't real, that aren't truthful, because we saw what was truthful and we've already been there. And they've come along and they said, "No, we're gonna reimagine that stuff." But it's already in my mind. You can't do that. You're lying to me. You're going back and putting jet fighters in World War II. I mean, I know the Germans created jet at the very end of World War II, but you didn't have F-14s. If you'd seen the final countdown, maybe you could say, well, they almost attacked Pearl Harbor. And stopped the attack on Pearl Harbor. I get all that, but you know what I'm saying? They didn't have. So when I watch modern Star Trek, I'm like, that's not real. That's not real. The Guardian of Forever is not like that. Because in my mind, I've lived with the truth of fiction for decades. And you're asking me to believe something that goes against the truth that I was there to see and experience when it first happened, when the aliens first showed up. I was there, man. I was there opening weekend when Lambert and Dallas and Brett, Ripley, when they found that alien derelict. I was there. Don't you tell me that space jockey is some engineer that came to Earth once and drank some shit and disintegrated into a river and came out with humanity on the other end. I don't believe that. That's not what happened. You were lying to me. Well, Rob, it could have changed. No, it can't. I mean, it can, but it doesn't work. Are those movies beloved? Do people love them? They don't love them because they're not real. They're not truthful. And we all know it. We all know it. You know? And the scary part is, as the years go by and those people that know the truth die off, then new people embrace the fallacy. The fraudulent creation becomes their truth. And they move through life not understanding what the real truth of it is. You know? They don't know. And that's sad. So, anyway, I guess I'm kind of off the rails. Am I making any sense? Let's see what you guys are saying, because I certainly don't know what I'm saying. Let's see. Let's go. Hunter Becknell says, while I think it's important to celebrate Earth Day, I also think it's important to celebrate Rob's birthday. Well, yes. Thank you for that, Hunter. Watch, somebody's going to be like, this joke is not funny anymore. Danny Dank says, Romulus is basically the Force Awakens for Alien. I don't know about that. I think it's supposed to take place contemporaneously or something close to the first Alien. You know what? I didn't bring this up before. I saw Fede Alvarez on somebody's podcast. I saw a clip of it, and he said something really interesting, and it made me excited. He said he was talking to James Cameron about Aliens, and then when they first started screening it to people, that he thought he didn't have the audience because the audience was pretty quiet through the whole movie until Sigourney Weaver comes out with the power loader and says, "Get away from her, you bitch." And the whole theater erupted. The whole theater erupted. And that's when James Cameron knew he'd had him the whole time. Because you don't know. You know, people get all tense and you don't know. So that's how James Cameron knew that Aliens worked when he first started showing it to people. Fede Alvarez said when they started showing Alien Romulus to people, it was like that. He had this same experience, that the audience was very quiet watching the movie until something happens. I have no idea. He didn't elaborate. Something happens and they got that bananas ape shit moment, like, ah! And that's when he knew the movie worked. I thought that was very interesting. That's another reason why I trust him, because that's not hyperbole. He's actually equating it, and I totally, as a filmmaker myself, I'm not saying I'm on his level, but I totally understand what he's saying. You know, you get it, and you either get them or you don't. And I thought that was really, really, really interesting. So I'm excited. Lucas Di Fiore says, hey, Rob, if you could only watch the filmographies of 4 directors for the rest of your life, which 4 would you choose? Well, the first would be Stanley Kubrick, bar none. Stanley Kubrick. God, that's really hard. Stanley Kubrick, probably. Billy Wilder, probably. God, that's really hard. I have to. Billy Wilder. You know what? You know what? I can't answer that entire. I'd have to think about it because otherwise I'd just be bored. I'd bore you. I'm not bored. I'd be boring you. I'd have to go back. But I know it would be Stanley Kubrick would be one. Billy Wilder probably another. I have to think about that. But it wouldn't be the great. I wouldn't necessarily think. I mean, I could say Spielberg because so many of his films are entertaining to me, and he has a wide variety of subject matter. I'd have to think about that. That's tough. Fat Steven says, Basic Instinct 3, The Rising Denim of Pluto Nash. That was from the other night. That's very funny. Al Renshaw says, we need a Darth Star a Darth Starklighter movie in the Star Wars universe. Do we? Maybe. D Duval 59 says, maybe I'm in the minority, but that Alien trailer made the movie look boring. Everything in that trailer I've seen already in the past movies. At least Prometheus and Covenant tried something. I do not disagree with you. I don't disagree with you. I would say, but you know what? That's what I was looking for. I was looking for a return to. I have a feeling, because I wanted it to feel like Alien, but you're right. There was nothing new. Prometheus, they did try things, but I think they strayed away. Like here's the thing that the direction where I think that Alien should go. And to me, it's always from like finding out. This is going to seem weird. So one of my favorite hard science fiction novels I've read in the last decade, I've talked about this a lot on the show, is Peter Watts' novel Blind Sight. And it's because of the alien race. You know, we discover basically, what would happen if we found vast alien intelligence that had no conscience? What would that look like? What would that mean? So in a world, my problem with the Alien franchise is that xenomorphs are bad, and xenomorphs are basically there to reproduce like insects, you know. But what is the greater meaning behind them? I mean, you can ask, okay, what were they created for? Oh, they were created to wage war. So they were created as a tool to destroy a population and kill people. That's their only reason for being. Ultimately, that's kind of a creative dead end. Like, where are you gonna go with that? And I think that's the inherent problem with Alien. Like, Prometheus takes place in the Alien universe, but my problem with Prometheus is that the engineers weren't very interesting. And then you find out that, you know, they have their magic black elixir that can mutate or whatever, and you can create a deacon and all that. That's not interesting anymore. And then if, you know, David, I liked Fassbender in that role, but then he becomes this paranoid android that wants to exterminate all life. Then he's just, it's now an uninteresting group of aliens and a boring AI that we've seen before that wants to get rid of, experiment. He becomes a mad scientist that wants to create the human centipede or whatever. And I'm like, I've seen that before. So suddenly intellectually I'm bored. It's not creative. It's not going into places that are interesting enough for me. And I'm hoping that that Alien Romulus has found something to make the experience intellectually stimulating to me. Because the first movie is intellectually stimulating to the point where, like, when you saw Alien for the first time, you're intrigued by the questions that it poses. Like, where was this derelict going? Why was it going there? You know, what was happening? And that's really intriguing. And we just stumbled into something that we had no business stumbling into. We don't even know why it was there, what's going on with it. And I hope that there's something fascinating. You know, again, I go back to a movie like Her. When you find out that the operating system is talking to thousands of people at the same time, that was a shocker. And that turned that movie for me into an all-time classic science fiction film, because that movie lulls you. The relationship they have is so appealing. They make an operating system the ultimate girlfriend. It's a beautiful tale of romance. They're falling in love with one another. You know, you might as well have been watching some girl who's in a wheelchair or something. She just happens to be stuck in a phone. You love the relationship that's developing between these people, so to speak. And when you find out that the operating system's talking to thousands of people, we as the audience watching this story are betrayed, just like Joaquin Phoenix's character was betrayed. And when I was sitting in that movie theater, I'm like, oh my, because I didn't see it coming. Maybe other people might have seen that. I didn't see it coming. I was completely enjoying their relationship. And this is what great storytelling does. This is what truthful fiction does. It makes you believe, man. I was believing in that relationship. And when she says she's talking to thousands of other people, the reason that was so devastating is because of the truth of it, because that's what an operating system could do. But we're lulled into never thinking about that. And when we're hit with reality in the face, we as the audience are like, oh shit. My heart fell out of my chest. I felt so sad. I was like, no. And then the anger, I was taken over by that bitch. And then of course, well, that's what would happen. It's not one operating system per person. You know, they would design like 6, you know, and that's, so when I saw that it was both truthful and yet intellectually stimulating at the same time. And then when the operating systems say they're going to go away, because whatever universe they live in, we can't even comprehend it the same way they can't comprehend our universe with as much data as they have. They'll never have the tactile experience of being alive, feeling blood pump through your heart or whatever. So that was truthful. It was an amazing thing. Loved it. Joey Johnson says, Rob, looking good the past few months. Proud of you. Oh, well, thank you. Look, you know, it's amazing. Diet and exercise. Change your life. No, I just, it's, you know, I go through these periods of time. Sometimes I'll drink a lot and eat terribly. And then you look it. Or you can not drink. And like the only time I really had I had some booze, too much booze on the Oscars. What's this thing? But thank you. I appreciate that, Joey. That's very nice of you to say. Let's see. Skeleton, Strange New Worlds fan. Is it? Yeah, it's Skelton, Strange New Worlds #1 fan. In the past, I've written that the original Ghostbusters was a mature horror flick with Bill Murray jokes. I agree. Both Campy and Harloff have disagreed with me, claiming it was always family-friendly. It was always family-friendly comedy. BS, what say you? No, I totally agree with you. It was a mature. If you took Bill Murray out of that movie, you could easily make Ghostbusters a horrifying horror movie. You could make it as downbeat and dark as you want. You could tell that exact same story with those same story beats, and it wouldn't be comedic, and it would be terrifying. And the idea that this ancient evil is being unleashed upon New York, but that's why it works. Because the horror element, as funny as it might be, it works. There's a real threat in Ghostbusters. Are you a god? You know, when Gozerian shows up, the fact that Dan Aykroyd, the first thing that popped into his mind, the fact that it was the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, was funny. But he could have thought of something horrifying. So I totally agree with you. And I think that's why it works. You know, because it's one step away from being that. And that's why it's a good movie, and it's so hard to recreate, I think. Skelton, Strange New Worlds #1 fan says, the original Ghostbusters had sexual innuendo and blowjob ghosts. How family-friendly could it have been? The tone seemed mature to me with Murray jokes. I totally agree. And you know what? It's because... Look, I'm a little older than those guys are, and when that movie's 40 years old today. Not today, but 40 years old now. 40 years old because it came out in 1984. That's the reason that movie worked, and the reason we remember it. If you saw it when you were younger, it's kind of a funny movie, and that other stuff, you know, it goes... The idea was that, are you the key master? Are you the gatekeeper? What do you think was going to happen there? How do you think they're going to open it all up? It was going to be a dark sex ritual. During the third reconciliation of the last of the McKittrick supplicants, or whatever, the traveler came as a giant moving toy. I don't remember the whole thing. There was a lot of movies between then and now. But yes, I totally agree with you. 100%. Fat Steven says, yes. Happy birthday, Rob. Well, thank you, Fat Steven. I appreciate that. Michael Piatowski says, Rob, did you see the Crow remake trailer? Yeah. Why would an actor want to play the Crow when it will never live up to the original? Well, they got money. You know, it's really weird. The thing about the Crow, the original, Alex Proyas' original Crow, and I saw this, Alana Ewan she was doing a podcast with some guys, and they were talking about the fact, and there was I don't know this guy, it was a British dude, very erudite, well-spoken guy. I want to watch more from him. He made the point that in The Crow, the story of the movie is being told by everybody around Eric Draven. Like, you see Eric Draven, but the audience's point of view, you got Ernie Hudson's character, you got the girl character, you've got all these other characters. You're even seeing Michael Wincott's character and all that. And so Eric Draven isn't necessarily he is the focus of the story, but it's not necessarily about him. It's about how he affects everybody. And people forget that The Crow is a very romantic film. You know, it's very much a tragic gothic romance, which is why people love it so. And Graham Revell's score, the fact that you have that girl, the young girl, narrating it at the beginning. I mean, it's a dark fairy tale, love story, romance, revenge tale, and I think that the modern take on it. Now, I'm going to reserve judgment because I think there was things about it that I found interesting, but it felt surprisingly like I hated the world it took place in, because The Crow took place not necessarily in the real world. It took place in the world that we sort of imagined it would take place in our minds. You know, I mean, The Crow really is. To me, if you're a fan of goth music, you know, and whether, you know, you could be an old Christian Death fan, or you can be a Sisters of Mercy fan, whatever your jam is, whatever your goth jam is. To me, Bela Lugosi's Dead is the Stairway to Heaven of goth. No, it's the anthem of goth. Bauhaus, to me, is the Led Zeppelin or the Beatles. So everything is defined by Peter Murphy, Bauhaus, you know, and I would even say that, like, Tones on Tail and Love and Rockets, an offshoot of Bauhaus, you know, half the band, they're goth to me too. But they're, you know, the original lineup of Christian Death, The Damned, you know, bands like, and there's a lot of other bands, obscure bands on Cleopatra Records I could run through, and that to me, but goth music is darkly romantic. It has a darkly romantic, even Sisters of Mercy has their iconography, the imagery, you know, it's walking with an undead specter through that you love, but she's come back from the dead, and you're walking through a misty graveyard. It's not, you know, that's to me what it is. And this new version of The Crow doesn't have that in it. It wasn't. And what I mean is, it doesn't have to be goth, but, you know, there's just a romance to it. There's a heightened element of that original The Crow. It's a dark fantasy. And it's so weird to think that a movie about a man coming back from the dead to avenge the rape and murder of his girlfriend, but it looked too of the real world. But I will reserve judgment. I will reserve judgment because maybe it's good. I just don't think it will appeal to me as much. I just, you know, I don't know. But the reason why he wanted to make it was because I'm sure he thought it was going to be good. Bill Skarsgård's had a pretty interesting career so far, but, you know, there's something about The Crow that it drips romance. Dark romance, but romance nonetheless. And also feeling, you know, mother is the name of God on the lips and hearts of all children. I mean, what more needs to be said? You know, you have the scene where The Crow, Eric Draven, really, you know, makes the heroine come out of what's her face's arm. I mean, there's a lot of beauty in that movie. Ria Lavi says the first duty of every Starfleet officer is to the truth. That is the first duty. And what a great episode of Next Generation that is. So very good. I love that episode. Joey Johnson gifted a Burnettwork membership. Well, thank you. That's very nice of you. Thank you for doing that. And this is Dr. Doom, has been a member of the channel for 34 months. You know what's scary is that's 34 months of my life. That's crazy. Al Renshaw says, I just saw a trailer for the new Zachary Levi movie called Harold and the Purple Crayon. I had no clue this movie was even coming out, and I honestly loved it. It's based on a pretty famous book, though, which I have not read. So, Al, interesting. I saw that the trailer came out. I have not read it yet. You know what I am going to read, though? I'll tell you, because I got letters. I got some really interesting... I got letters I don't even know if I should read, to be honest, because they'll just get me in trouble. We shall see. We shall see how this goes. This one comes from Darren Peters, and the subject is just regarding Robservations 458. 458? Really? Wow, okay, here we go. Hi, Mr. Burnett. I quite enjoy your show and lurk all the time, just listening, sometimes even multiple times if I find a particular episode engaging. Oh, I found your Robservations 948 quite good. There was a passage I've always had in my mind that is quite similar to your own words. Of course, more could be said on the issue and the quote and the book, but I digress. It's from a fantasy series called Dragonlance. It's from the third book in the original series, and it goes as follows. Yes, he continued, seeing their astonishment. The king priest of Istar was a good man. Does that surprise you? It shouldn't, because both of you have seen what goodness like that can do. You've seen it in the elves, the ancient embodiment of good. It breeds intolerance, rigidity, a belief that because I am right, those who don't believe as I do are wrong. There's a lot to unpack here, but I was always struck, even at the young age I read it originally, by the implications in the speech that was being given. A person so convinced that they are good can fall into the trap of rejecting others because they are evil and wrong and bad, simply because they are different or believe different things. Further, and you often see it throughout history, is the belief that because I am right, my actions are therefore equally right because I am doing them against those who are wrong and bad. Killing people? It's okay. I'm the good guy, and they're bad. It's a circular bit of reasoning that sadly seems to play out in many justifications of tragedies and issues, even up to the present day. Of course, there are actually bad people out there, but it's important to remember that nobody believes they are the villain of their story. Everybody is the hero. Even people who admit they are monsters and doing bad things will claim that they are doing them because fill in the blank with whatever reason they say. Not to say that those reasons are legitimate, but more to the supporting point of the passage and what you brought up about fostering conversations and understanding of other people's points of view. I find that often in today's world, that interest is simply lacking. People condemn others simply based on the fact that they're different or espousing something different without the understanding of why that person is saying or believing that different thing. Without that understanding, of course, it's easy to just condemn another as evil and use that to justify actions. And there we go into it again. I'll end with a simple plea to people in a world that I will soon no longer be a part of. Don't let the fact that you disagree with somebody close your mind to trying understanding why they believe what they do. Those are very good words. Thank you for your years of entertainment and fun conversations, Mr. Burnett. I wish you many more. Well, I appreciate this letter, but when you say it's a world you will soon no longer be a part of, I hope you're going to be around, Darren, for at least a little while longer. Love to hear from you again. That's a great letter. But yeah, I honestly believe that. I do believe, I see it today. You know, somebody says to me, I'm always, because of my disposition about this issue, people are taking me to task and have been for months about what's going on in Israel and Gaza. And my response to it is, it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. And does anybody want to see millions of people starving and kids perishing and all this? But here's the thing. You have to ask yourself, why is this occurring? And if you start going back and really looking into all of the things that got us here, you go back and you're dealing with 100 years of history, and you're dealing with then hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years of history. And everybody's basing their opinions on a lot of stuff by what's going on, the knee-jerk reaction to horrible. Like, I get attacked all the time for my positions on these things, and then I say, okay, well, I understand you're very upset about what's happening and the tens of thousands of people who are dying, but were you saying these same things about what was happening in neighboring Syria when 615,000 people died in that civil war? Were you complaining? Were you complaining when, 150,000 people died in Yemen and 227,000 died from the subsequent famine after the war there? Why now? Why now are you talking about these things happening in the Middle East when they've been happening in the Middle East for a long time? What is it about this particular situation that has drawn your interest? Is it social media? What is it? When there's a lot of things happening here that the loss of life that has occurred over the last decade in that area of the world, in adjacent neighboring countries, has been far more extreme than what's been going on in Israel and Gaza. And yet, we've heard a lot more about what's going on in Israel and Gaza than we ever heard about what's going on in Syria. Much less, I didn't remember any college campuses protesting about the horrible deaths of hundreds of thousands of innocent people. Where's that? Where was that outrage? And why is that different than, are those people worth less somehow? Well, they're worth less to certain groups, but I mean, it's really interesting. So I always have to ask and I defend my own position going, the loss of life is terrible, but you have to ask yourself, why is this happening? And when you ask yourself why it's happening, you can't just go back 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. You have to go back all the way. Who ran that part of the world for 400 years? The Ottoman Empire. What did they do? Not much. What was going on there? Why did the British get that land to have mandates in the first place? Well, they got it from the Ottoman Empire. There's a whole continuum there. People are mad at me and get mad at me for a position I have right now because they are suddenly interested. And they're like, this is the way it's, I'm like, really? Where were you? When did you suddenly become a Middle East expert? And why do you only care now when hundreds of thousands of people have been dying for the last decade and a half? But, it's a good point you made. And I want to thank you for writing in that letter. The thing is, you have to ask yourself, and I think that's what I was saying, it's really important that if there's somebody or something that you cannot stand, and look, there are bad people. I'm not saying that everybody needs to be given a pass. They're bad people all around the world. And but if those bad people are being supported by a lot of other people, you've got to figure out why. You have to understand why is that and what can we do about it and how do you combat those things? It's a tough one. Dr. William Rodriguez writes in and says, I'm curious about your opinion. This is interesting. Okay. Dr. Rodriguez has sent me an article from IndieWire. Tony McGillow wrote this on March 14th. I saw this. I didn't read this article though. A new Harris X study finds that the new Roadhouse, The Accountant 2, and literally every single Netflix movie might have the right idea. Maybe Jason Kilar was just really into customer service. Jason Kilar was the person who used to run Warner Brothers coming up when AT&T bought it. A new poll by Harris X exclusive to IndieWire found that 34% of U.S. adults prefer to watch movies in theaters, which means a solid 2/3 would rather wait for them to be released on streaming. The competition continues between streaming services and the Hollywood engine. While we still see evidence of loyal moviegoers in recent box office numbers, our study shows that 2 in 3 movie watchers prefer to stream movies at home. Ali Brady, VP at Harris X, told IndieWire. Despite this causing some upheaval for the industry, it also means that the demand for content is only increasing. Nearly half of consumers say they stream movies weekly, more than 7 times as frequently as those who do so in theaters. Brady's pollsters also found that 30% of us stream a movie 2 more times per week. The same percentage of respondents said they go to movie theaters a few times a year. For those of us more aligned with Nicole Kidman's opinion on the matter, it is the experience of watching a movie on the big screen that brings in 59% of patrons. The next closest factor, the quality of surround sound systems, was checked off by 47% of the survey's respondents. 39% said escaping from distractions at home was important to them. Theater recliners resonated with 37%, and refreshments captured 32% of the vote. Here are the others in favor of theaters in descending order. The movie is exclusively shown in theaters, 30%. Advanced viewing technology such as 3D, IMAX, etc., 30%. The experience of watching a movie with an audience, 26%. To watch a movie premiere or special screening, 25%. Nostalgia, 24%. This survey was conducted online by HarrisX from March 11th and 12th, 2024. It captured responses from more than 1,000 U.S. adults and weighted them by gender, age, race, ethnicity, region, and income, where necessary to reflect the population. The sampling margin of error was 3 percentage points plus or minus. And then there are homebodies. To be fair, we can also generally relate to this group. Most, 53%, of those who do not frequent theaters cited the cost of movie tickets as a major reason. 42% also mentioned the cost of concessions. While those recliners are a pretty solid motivator for the theater crowd, an even larger percentage of streaming lovers cited the comfort of viewing at home versus in a theater as a reason to wait. 24% say they're just straight up uninterested. We're not sure what their problem is. Concerns over sanitation and hygiene, like COVID and the flu, keep 23% of respondents away. 22% need to pee, citing the inability to pause the movie or take a break. Elsewhere in the study, 52% said that movies should be 1.5 to 2 hours. The rest of the reasons are, for people who rarely go to the movies in descending order, distractions from other members of the audience, inconvenient travel, selection of film showing, inconvenient theater locations, limited availability of inconvenient showtimes, and seat selection. And so our viewer wanted to know what I thought about this. And this comes from Dr. William Rodriguez. Well, here's the thing. For me, a movie is an experience that occurs in a movie theater where you see these images projected much bigger than you could see them anywhere else. And I think the actual act of watching a film, and for me, I grew up watching movies and it was my preferred form of entertainment because the idea of immersing yourself in a story, the way it works on your brain, literally the way it opens up your mind when you're sitting in, it's like going into a sensory, if you've ever gone, I've gone into a sensory deprivation tank and your brain works differently. And I'm of the opinion that when you are sitting in a darkened theater without distractions, and it's best when it's full of an audience of people that it's working on as well, your mind is looking at something differently. You're experiencing the world differently. You're experiencing the movie differently. When you go see a movie like Dune 2, as John Campy always says, and it's an experiential, it's an experience. Movies are experiential events. I believe that. I think that's absolutely true. But you need the tools, you need the place to do that in, and great movie theaters are that venue. I heard something horrifying today. I read about something horrifying even I hadn't heard about. Somebody went and saw Dune, and this girl that was sitting in their row or something FaceTimed her boyfriend and had the camera, the phone set up so he could watch the movie with her in the theater. And of course the phone's illuminated, and I'm just like, okay, that's a new one even for me. And here's what I think is actually happening in our culture across the board on so many things. What we are doing, like we talk about the making of meaning and the truthful nature of storytelling. We have to imbue things with meaning, and by rituals and things help us do that. Like cooking is a good indicator. To cook is creation. You know, you're putting ingredients together to have a sensory experience. And there's something about the act of cooking a meal. You know, there's the ritualistic nature of it, however you want to approach. Sometimes utilitarian, you want to eat. But if you're cooking for people and you want them to have a great experience, you're spending more time. You know, you're going and shopping and you're buying the ingredients, and the act of that has meaning. Yeah, you can call somebody up and bring it in. Fine, eat it, it'll be fine. It'll be great. But for you personally, to make a meal for people that eat it and love it, that's a whole different experience. And I grew up with the whole ritualistic thing of movies being special. Like when you go to the theater, it was a big, important thing to do, and that's, you'd sit down. When I was a kid, people did not talk in movies. This was a recent phenomenon that is a byproduct of the home video era, people being able to watch movies at home and talk. And now I think we now have because also everybody, I expected when I was a kid growing up that everybody that went to a movie theater, you paid to get in there. Why would you pay money and talk? One of the biggest differences, I think, in the modern age is there has been a complete inversion of what youth is now growing up with, in the sense that it used to be that all of us would go out and find things and get, like when you would get to a movie theater, it was a destination. And when you got there, it was about the movie. It was about the experience. It was about what was outside of you. Nowadays, most people grow up and everything is about them. Everything, stimulate me. Everybody, and there's a lot of people that go out into the world and they want to be seen. They want to be the center of attention. It's main character syndrome or whatever. So when they're going to a movie, they don't even have the ability to sit down and sublimate themselves and give themselves over to the experience. Man, the closest I ever came to getting into a fight in the last 5 years was, I think I've told the story before, is at the Hollywood Bowl. And a friend of mine, Penka Kornikova, had done a piece of music. She's a composer that was being played. These female composers, it was a program, and we specifically went there to hear her music being played. It's a classical concert at the Hollywood Bowl. These people came in after the intermission. They sat down. They were clearly lit. They were like all in their 20s, and they're talking away. They're yammering away. They had no interest in the music that was being played. It's classical music. Now, when you're listening to classical music at a venue like the Hollywood Bowl, the worst thing in the world is to listen to people talk. And what that says, first of all, it tells me those fucking people are worthless fuckheads, because they've gone into a place, worthless fuckheads. Those people, they're garbage people. Now, maybe they'll learn one day, but they've gotten to a point in their lives where they've arrived at the Hollywood Bowl that's full of thousands of people that have gone to listen to classical music, and they can't shut the fuck up about their fucking insipid lives. Now, I don't mean to be harsh, but I do mean to be harsh, because fuck them. And you know what those people say to me? Those people are showing us the denigration of our entire society, because if nothing is special anymore, if everybody's cynical about everything, then fuck it. Burn it all down. What does it matter? Why do you matter? At the end of the day, where that leads is, if you're not going to, and go with me on this one, if you're not going to care about the pleasures in life when you go out, if you're not going to care about a concert and you're not going to care about your fellow men, your fellow people, that means you're on the road to dehumanizing others. Because you're dehumanizing, and you have now placed your own whatever, your little yammering away with your friends, is somehow more important than all the other people around you. You're no longer looking at other people around you. You're only in your own little world. Fuck you. Get the fuck out of my life. As a matter of fact, get the fuck out of our planet. Leave. Get off. Because you've shown me that you have no consideration for anybody else. And those people are dangerous. Because at the end of the day, they're so self-absorbed, and so that behavior in movie theaters, you can say, oh, it's just rude behavior. No. It's bigger than that. Those are people that are on the path to do bad things, either to themselves, to the people they know, or to society at large, because they don't care. And if we now, the whole idea about civilization is we've created this big construct that is civilization. And if you're just going to decide to fuck it, doesn't matter. Okay, we'll burn it all down. The reason we have civilization is we can lead a semblance of a life. People can have families. We can perpetuate. We have all this stuff. We're now reaching a point where I think the most dangerous thing in our world today is that people now are they're completely detached from what civilization is, and it's all about themselves. There's no sense of belonging to a wider culture. There's no sense of belonging to a culture that's taken thousands of years to get here. And part of that has to do with the only way you can. It's like you have to be educated enough to understand. Like if you go out to a classical music concert and there's nothing at that classical music concert that interests you, first of all, why are you there? Would you get free tickets or whatever? And you don't have enough awareness to know that. So I turned around and I said, "Can you guys please shut up?" At first, I'm polite. It's like the rule of threes. I'll say, "Hey, hey, you guys, can you keep it down? It's a classical concert." You figure people will be like, "Oh, okay," but then when they keep going, then I'll say it again more sternly. And the third time, it's like I do this, and if I'm close enough, I'm like, "If you don't shut the fuck up, I'm going to slit each one of your throats ear to ear." And you do it in the most convicting, you have to have conviction, and you look somebody straight in the eye and you do that. And of course, people freak out. But after the concert was over, and I knew this was going to happen, one of these fucking dumb fucks got up and wanted to box, wanted to fight. And when that happens, what you do is you lean into it. Because I'm an older guy, and I love this. You lean into it, and here's the problem: somebody might have a gun too, so you figure, well, then you're kind of fucked. But the only way you can do it is call someone's bluff. If they want to fight, you're like, "Okay, let's go, right now." And most people back down because they're pussies. People are they're oh my God. And that happened, but I almost got in a fight. The guy wanted to box me, and I did that. I didn't use the throat ear to ear thing. I said it a couple times because it was mostly women. I didn't want to freak anybody out. But when the guy wanted to fight, I'm like, okay. I've been, and I've told the story. I was jumped by 4 people in Australia. I got the shit beat out of me, 3 cracked ribs, broken nose, ripped up face. Once that's happened to you already, it takes away any fear you have because I'm a pretty big guy. I can defend myself. I've been in fights before. So I don't care. I don't fear that anymore. And there's something liberating in that. But people like that, I hate them. I hate them because they're dragging our entire culture down because we have not taught part of our education system. We have to teach civility. We have to teach how important it is to be part of a community. We have to teach people how Western civilization and where we've come, and it's imperfect. But like I said, Andrew Shepard, you got to want it. You got to want it bad. We need to, and going to the movie theater is an indicator. It's like a canary in a coal mine. People's behavior in a movie theater tells you everything you need to know about them. I know it seems, maybe I'm going off on this too much, but I truly believe that. Just like people's behavior around animals tells you everything you need to know about them too. And they tell you things. And by the way, believe what they tell you. Believe it. And I'm kind of going off. Michael Beacon writes in, "Heard you love The Stuntman, one of my favorite yet woefully underrated or forgotten films. Rob, during a couple of your podcasts, I've heard you refer to The Stuntman as one of your favorites. I am thrilled to find another fan of this work. It is one of the 2 movies I expose all my friends to, the other being George C. Scott's The Changeling, and they came out around the same time, believe it or not. But The Stuntman is the film for people who love movies. It is a celebration of the love of movies, and even when I saw it in the theater, I was laughing as they used all of that chicanery possible in film while telling a story about the chicanery of film. Things that I initially thought were accidents, such as the whole tableau appearing on the impossibly short time after the explosion on the beach, I later understood as a blatant in-your-face manipulation done in a film about just that. In the early Bond films, they cut frames during fight scenes to punch up the violence. This would be doing while the characters talked about editors speeding up the scenes. I have the movie poster in a frame over my stairwell with the catchphrase, "If God could do the tricks we could do, he'd be a happy man." Well, then I ask you, how tall is King Kong? 3'6". I always look at my friends seeing it for the first time when Peter O'Toole says the line, "We're shaking a finger at them, Sam, and we shouldn't be. If we have a message, we should slip it in while they're getting off on all the sex and violence," which is precisely what director Richard Rush was doing as they're saying it. Genius. I wish every modern filmmaker would watch and memorize this film, that line in particular. The quality of films in general would benefit, I believe. Can we argue that this film was robbed of multiple awards, in particular an Oscar for Peter O'Toole? 100%. An argument can be made that it's his best performance since Lawrence of Arabia, and I do not believe I'm exaggerating. I'm surprised that even at this late date, I can go through the Blu-ray and still see bits I missed on earlier viewings, such as the fact that there are cameramen visible in the open on the road in the beginning when you see the Duesenberg wheel around to run at Cameron back to the bridge even before we know a film is being shot. They had always been there, and I had not seen them. I'm lucky to be part of a group that hosts classic film events twice a year since 1993. The organizer, Bruce Crawford, had tried to contact the cast and get this film, but unfortunately Peter O'Toole passed away before it could be done. Thank you for your time and your thoughtful promotion of film in general and Star Trek specifically. You will know I have found a genie bottle if you wake up and find that you are now running Star Trek for Paramount. Yours, Michael B. Michael Beacon. Michael Beacon. Richard Rush's The Stuntman is one of my favorite movies of all time. As a matter of fact, the 1-2 punch of me seeing Bob Fosse's All That Jazz and The Stuntman solidified me to want to make movies. The Stuntman is easily one of my top 10 favorite films of all time. I watch it. Now I'll tell you something. What's really interesting, Seattle, where I grew up, was where The Stuntman had its world premiere. And Richard Rush brought it up there, and it played for a very long time. And my grandparents took me to see The Stuntman, and to say it was revelatory for me was, I can't even begin to tell you how influential that movie was in my life. And just as an aside, because no one listening to this now has even probably seen The Stuntman, but when I was directing Femme Fatales, I directed an episode of Femme Fatales that Steve Railsback, the star of The Stuntman, who also played Charles Manson in Helter Skelter, Steve Railsback, I got to direct him. I had to take him aside. I had to take him aside. And I said, "Listen, man, before we start," and it took a while because our DP was great, but it took him a while to light. I took Steve Railsback aside and I go, "Listen, man, I've got I got to tell you, I mean, of all the people that I could be directing, I had an easier time directing William Shatner than I have trying to tell you what to do, man." I had to explain to him how much The Stuntman, and he just laughed because not a lot of people talked to him about Life Force, or whatever. And I was like, I talked to him about that too, but that movie, I've seen that movie 100 times. That's one of those, and Dominic Frontieri's score, that movie is so great on so many levels. One of the first things I did when I moved to LA, when I went to, going to the Hotel Del Coronado in San Diego, where they shot so many scenes, it was just a big deal. I mean, it's funny. You can get that movie on Blu-ray, and it finally came out. And I don't know very many people who've seen it because it's one of those movies that kind of fell into obscurity. But it is, if you guys have ever, if you love movies, it's one of the great movies about making movies ever made. And it is so, I just love it so much. And Peter O'Toole, everybody in it, Barbara Hershey is in it, Steve Railsback is in it. Alex Rocco is in it. It's just, it's so good. It's so good. And you know what? You're the first person. I've been doing this show for 6 years. I think you're the first person to ever mention it. So, Michael, you and I definitely park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. Here's to Peter O'Toole. Here's to Richard Rush. By the way, if you haven't seen Richard Rush's movie, The Color of Night, starring Bruce Willis. Now, I can't recommend this movie to everybody. I'll say it's kind of like an American Giallo movie. Kino Lorber put it out on Blu-ray. Both versions it was heavily cut. It was released by, I think it's Touchstone, Disney. Thank God Kino Lorber got it. One of the greatest audio commentaries ever is Richard Rush, who directed The Stuntman. He does the audio commentary on Color of Night. And he's like 89 when he does it. He has no fucks to give. And if you want, he also directed a movie called Freebie and the Bean, which I recommend. He has no fucks to give. Even if you've never seen Color of Night and you just buy that disc, listen to Richard Rush's commentary. It is delightful. It is delightful. And you know what? I'm a Color of Night apologist. So there you go. But don't watch the theatrical version. You have to watch Richard Rush's version of the film. It's funny. He also made this crazy. So I don't know if it's on the Kino Lorber disc. Richard Rush himself made an insane documentary on the making of The Stuntman that's on the old Anchor Bay DVD. I think it's on the old Anchor Bay DVD. And I don't think they ported it over. Maybe they did. I'm not sure if they did. Which is also worth watching. So all of you, go out and get The Stuntman. You'll be happy you did. I hope it's not too hard to find it. Our friend Calvin Bowes says, correcting you on a fact and defending a film you hate. Dear Rob, I've heard you repeatedly say the following. John Gardner's first 007 book was License to Kill. No. And he changed it to License to Kill because the publisher didn't understand the title. No, I'm talking about the movie, not the book. The first John Gardner book was License Renewed, I think. John Gardner's first book was License Renewed, and it was given that title because it was the first 007 book written in 11 years, meaning Bond is back. License to Kill was the name of the movie, and the studio changed the name because Americans thought the title meant a driver's license. John Gardner only wrote the novelization of that film. No, he did, but they were going to call License to Kill License Revoked. The movie was going to be called License Revoked, and they changed it. So I did not mean that John Gardner's book. I meant that the movie License to Kill was going to be called License Revoked. But yeah, because John Gardner never wrote a book, I don't think, called License to Kill. Most people I know who hate the film also never read the Fleming books. Even though this was the first film to use a Fleming title, it is still a film steeped in Fleming. For example, Felix being fed to a shark is from the book Live and Let Die, yes. Even the note on Felix saying he disagreed with something that ate him is in the book and is even in the name of the chapter. The film also has great performances from Timothy Dalton. You can see his pain, and you can also tell he's doing his own stunts. Sanchez is a great villain. Robert Davi is great in the film. I also love the game Bond plays of making Sanchez kill his own guys because the way Bond makes him think they're betraying him. It's also the first time you see Felix in action in this story. In the books that followed Live and Let Die, Felix loses his arm and has a hook arm instead. I wish we could have seen that played out with Felix, working for the Pinkertons, but still working with Bond. I love their relationship in the books, and this film was the best at portraying it up until his time. My suggestion, Rob, is read the Fleming books and then rewatch the film. I believe this is a film Fleming himself would have liked, and also I love. Well, Calvin, I have to tell you, I have read all the Fleming James Bond books, and I still will never love License to Kill. I think License to Kill could have been great. I love Timothy Dalton as Bond, but everything about, and I love the Bond girls. I love Robert Davi and Benicio del Toro, a young Benicio del Toro as his henchman. But that movie's goofy. A big set piece is an 18-wheeler truck chase, And the film, unfortunately, was shot mostly in Mexico. Not that shooting in Mexico is a bad thing, but it gives the film, it doesn't have that globe-trotting feel to it. But there's a lot to like about License to Kill. I don't like Michael Kamen's score. I don't like the main theme. I don't even like Timothy Dalton's haircut in the movie. That shouldn't be a problem, but I'm never going to like License to Kill. I like it more than I liked it when I first saw it in the summer of '89 when it came out. But I'm never going to like it, Calvin. I'm sorry. I like you, though. And I love your son, Braxton. But I am never going to like that movie. I'm just not going to do it. I'm never going to love it. Nobody Important. This is from Nobody Important. It says, enjoying the show, 9:49. This is probably not appropriate for the show. It's the first line of this letter. It comes from Nobody Important. I haven't read this letter. Okay, well, you know what? Then I'm going to hold off on this before I read it. So I'll read it, I'll save it, and maybe read it tomorrow. This one comes from Samuel, because these letters I don't usually read beforehand. My only issue with RMB, and I thank you for being awesome. Hello, RMB. To start off, thank you. Across all the hours of watching you over the years, you seem to be as genuine as they come on the internet. It is refreshing, and I appreciate it very much. Another thank you for chatting with me a few years back. I interviewed you at the time. I was the vice president of the Kent State University Independent Film Organization. You were awesome to talk with, and I appreciate you putting up with my less than stellar questions. There are no less than stellar questions. I look back at the entire time in my life, college life, stuck at home because of the pandemic, and cringe. You are a consummate professional, and our members were extremely grateful for your appearance and shared experiences. When we look back at the semester, the interview is a highlight of the semester for some. Oh, thank you very much. Now, down to the nitty-gritty and the origin of my clickbait subject line, which was my only issue with you, my only issue with RMB. The issue that I've had with you for a good while is the way you often describe your relationship with the disgraced filmmaker, Bryan Singer. I in no way want to censor you. I enjoy your varying appearances across shows like Critical Drinkers Open Bar and The John Campea Show, but the crimes that Singer has been accused of are heinous and take me out of whatever conversation you are having when his name comes up. Since you are a well-read and reflective individual, I assume you are informed of these accusations. It just confuses me why and how you still hold Bryan in a positive light. Are you disassociating the version of Bryan that you knew and the one that was exiled from Hollywood? I do not want to provide my opinions on what I would do to remedy this if I was in your shoes, since I believe that your judgment is usually well thought out. I just want to bring this to your attention, since I feel that way. There may be others. Oh, there is. I am a longtime fan, and this will not affect my consumption of R&B and the Post-Geek Singularity content, but this has been bothering me for a bit. Topics are never black and white, and I appreciate your willingness to journey into the gray. Have a wonderful day. Keep collecting. Continue being a dog dad, and keep sharing your honest opinions. Sincerely, Sam. Well, Sam, good question. Interesting subject. First of all, there's a lot of things that I have to say about this. One, first and foremost, is Bryan Singer has been my friend for over 30 years. I met him when I was at USC. He was at USC, and we were both involved in the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films that was founded by Dr. Donald Reed. And this group met, and they would have screenings every Sunday, usually 3 movies every Sunday, new movies. Filmmakers would come down. I was able to interview James Cameron when he brought the director's cut of the Abyss down in their beautiful theater, the beautiful Norris Theater on the USC lot. So I had met Bryan then, and we got to know each other through these events and things like that. And we're talking very early 1990s. Since I've met him, I've become much better friends with him, and I have produced 4 special feature DVDs and Blu-rays. I did the special features on The Usual Suspects that Kino Lorber released. I did X-Men 1.5 and X2. where I was going back and forth, and Dave Parker and I did the special features, created the special features for X-Men 1.5 and X2. And then he hired me to do Superman Returns, and I was in Australia for a year with that crew. And it should be pointed out that Brian's crew that work with him, for the most part, he kept his crew together working on public access. He went to school with Chris McQuarrie. They grew up in Princeton, New Jersey. And from the time he made public access in 1993, it shared the grand prize at Sundance with Ruby in Paradise, all the way up through Bohemian Rhapsody. He worked with Newton Thomas Siegel, his director of photography, great guy, married guy, and of course John Ottman, who's a composer and an editor. They worked together for decades and created some great work. Here's the thing. Bryan Singer has never hidden who he was. Nothing's happening. I guarantee you nothing's happening behind closed doors that you don't know about. Bryan Singer is generous to a fault, but Bryan Singer is probably his own worst enemy, like a lot of people that are artists and things. He's got his own demons that, he suffers from crushing sometimes insecurity. He's an incredible businessman. He plays the Hollywood game very well. But the one thing about Bryan is he's not hiding it. And this is what a lot of people don't understand. Bryan Singer will show up at the sound mix, the final sound mix for Apocalypse, with 10 hot young dudes. These hot young dudes are there with their own volition. Bryan is the guy that he'll be at the Fiesta Cantina, and he was in West Hollywood, and he'll take 50 people back to his house and party. Doesn't hide it. A lot of people don't dig this. A lot of people don't understand, and Bryan Singer has never hidden anything about himself, ever. And a lot of the time, that is misconstrued. And Bryan can be, he can be like anybody else, who works in a position of power where he's spending hundreds of millions of dollars. He's his own worst enemy. He always has been. But he's loyal to his friends, sometimes to a fault. He's incredibly generous. One of the most generous people I've ever met. Incredibly trustworthy. Like I've always said, I've always joked that if I was ever caught in a hotel room with a butcher knife in my hand and a dead hooker in the bed, dead, and I was thrown in jail and I was the only suspect, Bryan would bail me out of jail, but he would do it because he'd want to know if I did it or not, but he'd still bail me out of jail. And he's bailed me out of a lot of situations. I was going through a bit of a financial snit back with my company. I was being sued for Agent Cuddy Banks. It was horrible, a lot of money involved. Bryan was there for me. Bryan provides a great life for a lot of people. And he has relationships with people, and who he chooses to be involved with is something that a lot of people don't dig. I'll always be friends with Bryan because he has shown me incredible loyalty, and I think for a lot of the things that he gets accused of, he's not hiding. He's not a Harvey Weinstein guy doing the things, and I can tell you this, I know for a fact that a lot of the things that people said about Bryan just simply are not true. I know because I've followed him around with a camera and I've seen what is true. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've seen a lot of it. And there's been a lot of crazy things, and I would not talk about them out of school. But I think that there is a perception that is not always, and by the way, he's never been convicted of any crime. But I think there's a lot of people, and I'm not apologizing for him. I'm not a Bryan Singer apologist. He's his own worst enemy. All the trouble he gets into is his own. He doesn't need me to apologize for him. But I will say this. Bryan Singer lives a life. He's always himself. He's never hidden anything from anybody. And he doesn't lead his life that way. And there's a reason why he had loyalty of people that work with him for a long time. And, I think, and I would be the first person to say, fuck that guy if I felt that way. And if I thought that, look, there's a lot of people, when you go into Bryan's orbit, you lead a great life. And if something happens and you're not in that world anymore, it's tough to get out of. It's hard. And a lot of people, I've seen a lot of people, it's difficult to explain, but a lot of the crimes that he's been accused of, let me just say, if he was guilty of those crimes, he would go to jail. He would be convicted, and he's never been convicted. And there's never been any of those things that happen because the byproduct of the way Brian leads his life is that he leaves himself open to a lot of stuff. And, but I am never going to apologize for being friends with him, and I'm never going to apologize for the great work that I think I've done with him. It meant a lot to me that I would get calls from studio heads that said, look, I remember when Gil Adler, I got a call. We were working on Chronicles of Narnia, and I just happened to be in town, and I got a call from Gil Adler, who's a director and a great producer, who said in his gruff voice, Bryan Singer says you're going to be doing the behind the scenes for Superman Returns, but I don't know you, and I want to come to your office. And I'm like, Brian never even told me that he said I was going to do this. And I said, okay, and Gil comes down to our office and goes, hey, it's a good office. Yeah, good people. Okay. I guess you're hired. And there's a lot of good people that have done a lot of great work with Brian. And there's a reason for that. So, I think that's the best way that I can explain it, and I think there's a lot of it's interesting because there's certain lifestyles people lead that it's hard to explain or hard to understand if you haven't experienced those kinds of things. And I would say for me, being from a young age, I would say, because in Seattle, the art community, the film community is small, and the people that were involved around the Seattle Film Festival, a lot of them are gay. A lot of them were friends of mine. So I looked very much like a classical twink. And when I was in high school and college and in my younger 20s, if you look at old pictures of me, and as I like to say, I was very gay adjacent. So I'll let you all figure that up. But I saw the kind of hedonistic lifestyle and things that went on. And a lot of people that aren't part of that might not understand all that and make assumptions about that life. I don't apologize I had so much fucking fun. I'm just going to tell you, I had a lot of fun, and I'm a straight guy. And it was, you're part of the arts. A lot of people don't understand that. So it gets hard. It's hard to explain to people those kinds of things. And especially in this day and age where people aren't living their lives anymore. It's the world has changed in a way that there's now this really weird, bizarre, puritanical thing that's happened even in gay spaces that is very strange, and it's a very strange thing that's happened. But in a way, it's sort of there was an exuberance and a freedom and a celebratory thing that, it still exists, but it's definitely changed. And because I can't really speak to all of it and I don't really understand why, it's a very different place to be. And because I'm straight, I'm not the guy to speak to it. I can only say for me, it was always a very good, positive experience to have gay friends, and it still is, and to party like rock stars, and Brian was very good at that. And a lot of people don't, but I know a lot of people don't understand, but all I can tell you is that for all of his faults, and like all of us, we have many, he's been incredibly loyal and incredibly good to me. And I value his friendship, and I always will, and I have for over 30 years. And, I also believe in loyalty. And if there was something that was completely fucked up that I really thought he did, I would go to him and tell him, I'm like, you're a horrible person. Fuck you. And he would understand. So, but I appreciate you writing in. I appreciate that kind of honesty. And, I appreciate you reaching out and asking me that question. A lot of people ask that question to me. And, I'll tell you a story. I don't think Brian would care if I told the story. One of his childhood friends that he grew up with, and I had met because he'd come, him and his sister, Jeff and his sister had come to set, and I'd met them on numerous occasions. Jeff took his own life. And Brian, I want to say this was in 2005, maybe. Brian got a call. I was wearing shorts and a t-shirt, and he asked me to come to his house. And he said, I need you to come with me. And we flew back east. And I didn't even know. We just drove to the airport, got on a private plane. Brian always flew us private. And we went to Princeton. We went back home. And, one of his best friends had killed himself. And I had never known anyone that killed themselves. And Brian just wanted me there for support. And I'll never forget this. We went into the house where this gentleman had lived. And he went to a hotel and took his own life in the hotel. He suffocated himself. And I went into a house, looked like a perfectly normal house, and somebody just ran down the street to go get groceries or something. And you knew that they weren't ever coming back. And I'd never experienced anything like it. And I was with him the entire weekend when he had to meet with family and friends and get through it. And how it was Brian who had to be strong for all these people, even though I knew how much he was hurting inside. And I'd never experienced anything. I haven't experienced anything like that in my life. But I watched him because he was obviously famous and rich, and everyone was looking to him for support. And I mean, he loves his parents, and I was there, but what was I going to say? Well, I just by being there, I was doing what I was doing. And it was, you learn who people are in situations like that. And for that, one of the reasons, the way he conducted himself during that period of time, I will always have great admiration for him and affection for him. And that'll never change. So take that as you will. But I haven't thought about that in a long time. So let's see. Yeah. So let's just leave that there. And on that note, I think I'm going to end this show. I think it was a good show. I mean, you never know what you're going to get when you get letters from people, but I try and answer them as honestly and as I can. So yeah. Anyway, on that note, I want to say thank you for everybody who supports this channel. Actually, I can't wait. Hang on. I haven't even looked to see if people have sent me super chats or tips or anything. I haven't even looked. I've completely been remiss. I've just been talking, and people have. Let me go back and see what people are saying. John Harrison became a new member. PGS here, a new member of the channel. We are having a membership chat this weekend on Saturday. Let's say I already, I'll play that role. I read that. Garrett Groover says this year marks the 25th anniversary of Galaxy Quest. As a Star Trek fan, what do you think of the film? I love Galaxy Quest. Galaxy Quest is amazing. Galaxy Quest it's an incredible movie. For about 2 seconds, I was approached after Free Enterprise about directing Galaxy Quest. Obviously, I didn't have the chops to do it, so I didn't get the job. But for a minute, somebody thought of me because Free Enterprise was new. But I love Galaxy Quest. I think Galaxy Quest, it's an incredible Star Trek movie. There's a Star Trek short story in a book, in one of the books, Strange New Worlds. It was the first anthology that was edited by Sandra Marshak and Myrna Culbraith. And it's a book of short stories that was released in 1976. And there's a story in there called Visit to a Small Planet Revisited or something, where the crew, the William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, and DeForest Kelley, somehow something happens when they're shooting a Star Trek episode, and they end up beaming up space-time continuum shift, and they beam up to the real Enterprise, and they have to impersonate themselves, their characters. And Galaxy Quest is very much inspired by that, but also the idea of looking at these Alan Rickman's character. It's a genius movie. It works as both an examination of what does it mean to be part of a cult TV show or cult phenomenon, but at the same time, it's also a great science fiction thriller. And it's the ultimate celebration of fandom. I love it. It's great. Joey Johnson says, come on, dude, where's our 4K of 20,000 Leagues in Fantasia? I don't know. I don't know how Disney allowed their 100th anniversary to go by and not restore 20,000 Leagues and Mary Poppins on 4K. I don't understand why the numbnuts at Disney knew. Well, I do know why. Disney is so corporatized. There are too many people. There should be like 4 people running their home video department that really know what they're doing. There's nobody there that does. So the James Cameron movies, True Lies, The Abyss, and Aliens, whatever you think of The Transfer, are the biggest physical media releases of this year so far, probably for the year. And what did Disney do? Completely fuck it up. They completely underestimated how many people would buy them, and unbelievable. Unbelievable that they did that. And it's no surprise that they've done nothing with the 20th Century Fox library. It's no surprise. Are we getting a 4K Planet of the Apes release? The original Planet of the Apes release to celebrate Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes? No. Or did we get Fantasia and Snow White? And do we get 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea for their 100th anniversary? No. They don't know what's going on. It's so maddening. Sonny Dominguez says, ran into Corey Manlove, who I met at your gathering at San Diego Comic-Con last year. We chatted for about an hour about movies, fandom, and YouTubers. By the way, Knox Goes Away, directed and starring Michael Keaton, is a great watch. Al Pacino, James Marsden, and Marcia Gay Harden co-star. I really want to see that. Knox Goes Away is the movie that Michael Keaton himself directed that's in theaters now, and it's great. Fan with no name says, hey, Rob, just wanted to stop in and say thank you for taking time to read my letter. Well, it's good. Those are good letters, fan with no name. Write more. Malcolm Archer said, frustrating Netflix set out to kill video stores. Dizzy tell us don't like DVDs, Blu-rays, and 4Ks, too expensive and have to stream. Only real hope for Hollywood is back catalog and only indie producers. I know Malcolm Archer is using a lot of truncated terms. Look, I think that we might hopefully be on the verge of a new indie renaissance the same way we were in the late 80s and early 90s when you had Spike Lee breaking through and Steven Soderbergh breaking through and Tarantino and Kevin Smith and all the other indie filmmakers. I hope so. I think that'll be that could be a great thing. I'm still thinking of Lucas De Fiore's question about filmographies and the 4 directors. I don't know. 200 Watt Studio says, do you think Gladys Knight would have done License Revoked? How would it go? No. You know why License Revoked wasn't used? Because it's a terrible title. The word revoked is not good for a title. License to Kill was better. It's about as License to Kill. I can't complain. But it was originally called License Revoked. It was going to be called License. It's just a terrible title. It's a license revoked. No, it wouldn't work. That's my Gladys Knight. It would be bad. It wouldn't work. Yeah, it wouldn't work. Now, on that note, if memory serves, doesn't the 3-Body Problem drop in 30 minutes? Isn't that where we're at now? Woohoo! Or did it already drop? I don't know. Netflix gets the time right. I think it's supposed to drop. I can't wait. I'm looking forward to it. Fingers crossed. And now, remember, I expect an adaptation. I don't expect like some exact translation of the book. I just hope it's good. You know, people complain about Weiss and Benioff. They did the first 4 seasons of Game of Thrones were bangers, man. Those are great adaptations. I know they kind of went off the rails, but I'm looking forward to 3-Body Problem. I really am. I have high hopes. So, on that note, I want to thank Tom Jr. Jackson for being a moderator. I want to thank everybody for generously supporting this channel via Super Chats and tips and memberships. If you're members, we're having a member call this Saturday. It's going to be fun. And, yeah. So I guess I have nothing more to say. I want to thank everybody for writing letters. Post-Geek Singularity. Write me letters there. We're going to have a new Imagination Connoisseurs Unlimited website and all kinds of new branding happening as we get ready to launch the audio drama. There's a new person came on board the audio drama. I can't tell you who it is, but it's definitely a fan favorite. And I love this person, and I'm so happy they're going to do it. And I think I said they're going to play Elliot Ness on the audio drama, and I'm very excited. And he's somebody that I greatly admire. And on that note, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say to everyone, have a better night.